A very warm welcome once again to the High Performance Human podcast. It's your man Andy here, and I tell you what, we are in revered company today. We really, really are. Honestly, I didn't know if this little trip of mine was going to have me converse with someone of this sort of stature or nature for quite some time, but I am incredibly privileged to be joined by Daniel Flynn, who is the co-founder of Thankyou, which is a social enterprise with a vision of making sure that we see a world where not one person experiences extreme poverty. Now, Daniel has not only shifted the narrative around poverty, I would suggest, around the world, but he's done it from a very, very young age. And one thing that I think is going to be amazing in this episode, team, is that the boundaries of your life are only defined by you. And Daniel's very much got an example of someone that has just defined his own boundaries wherever the hell he's wanted to define them, which has been absolutely incredible to follow from afar. So, starting in 2008, Thankyou has become a social enterprise that has very much taken the world by storm. When you have the likes of Mr. Barak Obama, former president of the United States, hounding Daniel to find out when he's going to be taking this thing worldwide, you know he's onto a good thing. But as well as that, he is a dad of two. His co-founder is also his better half, and team. Everything that I've heard about from this guy from a personal point of view is that, geez, he's got his feet very much firmly on the ground. Daniel Flynn, it's an absolute pleasure and an honor to have you on the High Performance Human podcast. How are you today?
Andy, well, after that introduction, it sounds amazing. That guy sounds great. So thank you. No, it's an honor to be here, and I think the pretty conversation we were having before this went live, I just think the mission you're on is important. These conversations you're having, so I'm glad we got time today to do it.
Very, very good, man. I'm really glad you're going to help us out. So, team, the High Performance Human podcast, for those of you that are listening for the first time, is it has a purpose of trying to make success more attainable, more accessible. There is a paralysis of information in society these days. And what we want to try and do, the likes of Daniel, myself, and a few others that have been on the podcast so far, we want to try and make you feel that you can achieve what you want to achieve and do it in a way that becomes a little bit more practical. So no kumbaya conversations will be found here. So Daniel is also a dad of two, as am I. So we're both young parents as well. And so hopefully we'll be able to shed some light for you guys, especially if you are a parent to young kids and have concerns around how the world's going to play out moving down the track. So, Daniel, before we crack on, though, I wanted to ask you if you could just give us a bit of an elevator spiel as to who you are, what you're about, and what's brought you on this journey to get to this point.
Awesome. Look, what brought me to this point? My mind goes straight back to a moment. I was 19 years old. I actually had a bit of a plan, I thought. My future career, I'd sort of map some stuff out in property development and business. But I find myself, like I am right now, sitting in front of my computer. And in this particular moment, I've got tears streaming down my face because I'm watching stories of kids who don't have access to clean water. And probably worse than that, in this part of sub-Saharan Africa, they talked about their brothers and sisters dying from waterborne disease. And the tears came from, like, it's a moving, shocking story, but also the question of what if it's me? Then I saw another number. It was the amount we spent on bottled water. Today it's $350 billion. When you zoom out to consumer spending, it's $69 trillion. That's what we spend as consumers. Thankyou, the elevator pitch. It's a bridge between these two extreme poverty. How do we end this injustice? Well, I think together we can through the products that we purchase. And at Thankyou, we've created a brand and a consumer goods business with now 50 products like hand and body wash that exist 100% to help end this injustice. I think the secret behind Thankyou it isn't really good product. Although when you test it against others, you're going to discover this is remarkable product. But it's the people who made it. It's the people behind this. We have the most beautiful, remarkable innovators coming together to create the brand you see. We've raised $18.55 million and we've distributed it. But it's not just the people that make it that make this awesome. It's the people that support it. One super quick story, then I'm out. Back to you, Andy. But this shows you the power of Thankyou, the movement behind this. So for 5 years, the two biggest supermarkets in Australia, they said no. And that was hard. They've got 70% market share. And so we threw to the people. It was a petition. We said, hey, everyone, 2 weeks from today, we're presenting to Coles and Woolies. We need you to jump onto their Facebook wall to say if they stock the Thankyou products that you'd buy them. And it was so fun. People sung, dance, rapped. We may have flown 2 helicopters, one in Melbourne, one in Sydney, with these 20,000 square foot signs with these huge, it's a dear Coles, thank you for changing the world, in brackets, if you say yes, because we hadn't met yet. And it was this beautiful, like, people-powered movement. The helicopter pilots donated their time to fly for free. It was cool because Coles and Woolies took up the call to action. They said yes. Product hits the shelf. Kind of the rest is history. I think to me, the elevator pitch and Thankyou, if you were to sum it up in one word, it's people. It's people, man. In 2 words, it's probably empowering people. And this is about empowering consumers, but with the profit, empowering those living in extreme poverty to help them get out of a cycle that is trapping and it is costly.
Man, there's a couple of massive questions that I want to ask you off the back of that. But before we crack on, Daniel, we have this tradition. After we ask the first question, the next question we ask is what your opinion and what your belief is around high-performance humans. I have this notion that there's 4 elements to it: success, connection, influence, and happiness. And not one can exist or survive without the other one in a bit of an ecosystem. Really intrigued to see what your version of a high-performance human is. What is your definition?
Look, this comes from depth of journey, and maybe we get into some of the details later. It's come from some hard places, but I think my definition of high performance is a little out of step from the cultural narrative of pure winning at your said discipline. Be it from sport to business to speaking. To me, true high performance is the ability to be at the top of your game in that and to deliver great results whilst managing the foundations, the more important things in life. And so often we see this trade-off and someone hits this peak. We are a high performer, yes. And then we're like, what? Drug addiction? What? Broken family? Horrible? What? That? And I think to me, I'm like, wow, we've created a world where we still hero that. And then we're shocked at sort of the fallout. I think the future of high performance is, and my dream is that, if you were to interview my co-founder and wife, she would say, oh no, as a husband, I'm not sure she'd ever say he's a high performer, but like he's really good.
Hey, look, at the end of the day, we've all got shit we need to improve according to our part.
Yeah. Right? Correct. But the dream state is that the kids grow up and dad's not perfect, but like he was a great dad. He was present. He was what we needed him to be. And also, there's some books and they did well, and there's some, social enterprise that did well. But like, I think for me, a high performer is the one that can manage that. And I would almost, not trying to be controversial here, but I would say if you're only able to high perform in a kind of set discipline at the cost of what matters most, I don't think that's high performance. I think it's a cultural definition of it, but I think we're selling ourselves short.
Do you think that I completely concur? Do you think that a lot of that is down to what society has prioritized as important, right? So, the glamorization or the amortization of success and material goods and so on and so forth. Like you said, we are operating in extreme consumerism, right? Which is what you're trying to address the balance of. But would you suggest then that we've got it twisted in terms of what is actually inherently important to us as human beings from a societal point of view?
Yeah, and this is why it's a tricky topic, because it's like it sort of digs deep into the sort of the human psyche and some of these like really big ideas and sort of ugly realities. And I think social media has done a very good job at just adding fuel to what was already kind of unhealthy human reality, stuff like greed and like these sort of these ideas of like more and win at all costs. And I think you know it's yes. In answer to your question, yes, I think we have it wrong, but we also it's hard to fight it because everyone's in on it.
Yeah.
We're still heroing the super fast rise to fame. Like we hero that. I mean, right now I'm reading this morning about someone who I've thought is amazing and looked up to for a long time. I'm Mr. Beast, and he's most successful YouTuber and influencer on the planet, and he's 26, and I'm reading articles and watching videos about all of the things he's got wrong, and it's looking hectic for him. But like, there's so many before him. Like that's YouTube's star. But you go across business, you go across sport, you go across Justin Bieber and music, like epic rise to fame. Everyone's like, yeah. But like the speed of that, and he was great at it. But then everyone's like, yeah, but he got some other stuff wrong, and but I think we've got to address this. We've got to talk about things like speed of growth. We've got to talk about like maybe redefining success. And I think some of this is bubbling up, and one thing that social media has done well is a little more transparency. So let's say you're a leader and you're winning and perceived to be winning. Great, right? In the old world, you could probably do that whilst being a pretty terrible human to a lot of people and get away with it. Today, there's a little more transparency. And so at some point, bad actors who appear good in time are caught out, called out. And so, I think that's doing a bit of a natural reset. Yeah.
I'm interested to dig into what you were saying before about about Thankyou, and you said it's about the people, and you said the words good energy, right? You said the words good energy coming together for a greater purpose. Obviously in society and the perception via social media, because let's not blame social media, it's our use of it, right? But we have a negative bias as human beings. Our brains automatically gravitate towards the negative because it is a natural safety mechanism. So it wants to make sure that everything's safe and certain and all the rest of it, right? But what you show, like the example the greatest example that Thankyou is it's an example that the same volume of negative energy that creates so much of the drama that we see play out, and this is where that transparency really does, kick off. I mean, being a POM in the UK at the minute, there's all sorts of riots kicking off and whatnot. Far right, far left, all going to shit, right? And a lot of it over false narratives that has just garnered attention through negative energy, right?
Wow.
You look at the Olympics, and that poor woman who got an absolute barrage, but it happened before people actually understood the facts, right? And I looked at that as a parent first and was like, how would you be? How would you be if you were there? If I was her dad, how would you be? Right? And
it broke my heart. I'm the same as you, and I felt tricked. I like, because I was reading all the headlines, I was reading the stuff, the clickbaits, and I was so like you, messed up by this, and I'm like, wow. But what drove it? I think there's many things, but one of the things that drove it is almost what you're talking about, is this high performance thing. So as influencers or commentators, people want to be quick, to be first, to be in the narrative, to sort of to win the content game, to sort of like better solidify their narrative of the world. And so they're out there, and it's like, as humanity, we have to become slower to speak. And I know that sounds like, what? We have to become slower to speak. We have to listen. We have to consider, and I think it's going to take a few more of these moments, I think, for people to wake up to that. But it's there's actually wisdom sometimes in not speaking and in listening and in considering. And
I couldn't agree more. In the point that was coming round to was the fact that you manage, and I want to know how and why. Well, not I know why, but I want to know how. You have got an incredible, natural but refined ability to create viral moments that is born through an abundance of good and positive and great vibes and worthwhile and these incredible things that us humans have the ability within us to do and have and be and broadcast, right? You've managed to harness the good in people and create these ridiculously viral moments, right? That have generated incredible viewerships and whatnot. um how have you managed that when humans are inherently looking for negative?
okay, so what an interesting topic. I'll give you some of the answer to that question, but just the first interesting statement I heard, it was like a quote recently, and I don't remember it word for word, but it was along the lines of um, the world. Um, so the future belongs to the optimist, and I thought that's interesting. The future belongs to the optimist, like those who are optimistic, and there's a role for pessimism. And there's a role for sort of like, hang on, we need to have a realistic view here, and we need to consider everything. But I think like often entrepreneurialism, in fact, most high performance is this sort of bias towards optimism. Like
Mm.
I can break a world record. How could you break a world record? I can get there, and so that high performance sort of runner, they get there. I was like, that's impossible. For me, I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful to grow up with the mum and dad I had, and not everyone gets that. But if there was a chief optimist in the world, I think it's my dad. He would always find the positive in everything. And man, did it annoy me. Like like my friends would be like, is your dad okay? Like, is he for real? I was like, no, this is literally my dad. So like if you had a car crash and you met him, and like let's say you both walked out of your cars, so it's bad but not too bad. And this happened, this is a real story, but it was raining and my dad met the person, and like literally he would meet you and be like, wow, it's great to meet you. This is unfortunate, but we wouldn't have met if this didn't happen. And gosh, the rain doesn't make you feel alive. Like it's a view of the world that I'm like, dad, like, wow. Now, my dad's done actually in his different lines of work over the years, lots of like, yeah, really deep stuff. And so I think his leaning to optimism and this sort of faith view of the world and this hope view of the world, it's not just wishful thinking. Like it is a tool in our toolkit as humans
Mm.
to fight injustice, to find light in dark places, to bring that light in, to find hope. And so baked into Thankyou, every campaign, every book, every idea is optimism. It's questions like, but what if it did work, instead of the huge amount of data that says, well, that won't work.
Mm.
But the problem sometimes with this negative bias, I think it's a kryptonite
Mm.
for humanity, because we have a bias, we see the data, and then we find ourselves convinced to not even try. At Thankyou, we'll try. And if we fail, we'll get up again and again and again and again. And we've learned to treat failure different to maybe how some would view it. We have learned, and recently been able to put language to this, we've learned to see failure as feedback, literally just feedback, data feedback. So it didn't work. Why? What did we learn? Great. Now let's just keep going. Because like we're not stopping. Like we won't. I love Simon Sinek's work, The Infinite Game.
Mm.
We just had a hit at Thankyou the other day. Like it was a really tough thing happen, and like it's tricky. Like this business is hard, and it was a punch in the gut. And Kirk, who's our chief commercial officer, he loves The Infinite Game. And I'd sent an email to someone to try and solve this, and they responded back late on a Friday night. A screenshot, text Kirk, the infinite game. And it's just this idea we have of like, let's keep going, let's find a way, let's find possible. That's one of our values at Thankyou. So where did it come from? Big credit to my dad. But I think for me, for Justine, for our team, we've had to foster a culture that provides space for optimism, right? That provides space for asking these other questions and to wonder, what if it did work, instead of just the data says no, or, why bother?
I think when it comes to business entrepreneurship, that sort of carry on, I've had a few of these conversations quite recently, whereby people can mistake the analysis of the practicality with negativity, right? So a lot of entrepreneurs, yes, you're right, they are born in optimism, but the ones that really go and actually achieve incredible things or amazing things or just good things, right? They will see a situation and they do have a grounding of practicality that allows them to have a much more solid foundation for that optimism to then grow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have there been instances, whether it's either been with yourself or conversations between you and your beloved wife, or people on the board, whereby there's been a bit of confusion as to whether are we looking at practicality or are we just being negative here? Like have you had situations and conversations around that sort of stuff? Because a lot of the time that tends to get mistaken because of nothing else other than people just got out of bed the wrong side one day, right? So how have you handled those sorts of conversations when it's been brought into question? Are we looking at this practically or are we looking at this negatively?
Yeah, it's incredibly important. It's nuanced, and I didn't handle it well early on, because for me, as someone who's quite optimistic, I'm like, hey, let's find a way. Um, I just saw everything as negativity. I was like, why? Like, what is this negativity? When actually, I've seen the flip side of what happens when you are overly optimistic. You got a bunch of groupthink sort of forming. You're not critically looking at, you're not really thinking about the risks and how you're going to manage it, and then you just basically jump off a cliff, and there is no plane to build on the way down. Like, you literally forgot the parts. So in entrepreneurialism, it's like, yeah, you build the plane on the way down. Yeah, sure, but there's some elements you got to have. Otherwise, you're swinging your hands in the air and you're going to die. So I would love to say we've learned. I think I'll spend my life learning how to delineate between negativity and important practicality. And apologies everyone for that note. I need to put my computer on silent. Its notifications are on. But look, I think it also comes down to trust with the people you're working with, and that depth of relationship, to be able to understand, like, okay, no, this is either negativity, and everyone, myself included, can be negative. I'm optimistic, but I can get real negative, and be able to delineate between the two. So I don't even know if humans, sometimes we know the difference as we say it. We'll say it's practical. Everyone will say that, but
yeah. And that's a fair point. That's a fair point, Daniel, that sometimes we can disguise negativity as practicality, right? Or laziness as practicality. Or something else that is as equally as not great. And you could also argue, right? If you think about this from a movement perspective, take that transgender or non-transgender issue as it was in the Olympics with the boxing.
Yeah.
One thing that you just made mention there, before you said that we'll probably need to see a few more of these instances for the reality to sink in. Mm-hmm. And when we think about what we just said before, is that, anything that builds genuine, fortifiable, solidified momentum and growth is born in a foundation of reality and practicality, right? We could start to see the chinks in the armor of some of these negative movements coming to pass, because a heck of a lot of it is not ground in reality or practicality or what have you, right? And I'm hoping, and I think this is a really good point that we're perhaps highlighting here, that we stumbled across, is that you can argue your case your side one way or the other, right? People have opinions on stuff, and everybody's entitled to one. But the practical reality as to whether a movement is legit or not is going to be the one thing that underpins whether any of these things actually cause major effects or major changes in society these days, right? And I think that we're starting to see little glimmers, maybe of hope, whereby people are starting to recognize validity versus fear and scaremongering and agenda bias and what have you, right? What do you think when you think about a couple of the movements that are garnering momentum, whether it's good or bad? And like I said, tying it in with what I highlighted about you managing to garner that positive optimism and whatnot in people. Do we think that, or how much of an opportunity do you think that there is, not just as a person that wants to invoke positive change, but from a business point of view? Let's get practical about this as well. As to the amount of optimism or the amount of space for optimism that there is in society these days, and how much optimism can be as a magnet for success.
Look, it's interesting with all this negativity and the way that we've got this negative bias, and bad news travels faster than good news, and we've seen that controversy is what gets clicks and attention, and this is truth. It sucks. In fact, I did years ago a media training session that I hadn't done before, and we're getting a lot of media, and someone's like, "Have you been media trained?" I'm like, "What? You can?" And I did this session, and basically, one thing I remember is they said, "Media, the entire business summed up in one word is controversy." So if you're not able to say something controversial, be controversial. It's so controversial, you're not going to get on there. And I was like, that sucks. And it does explain why many good causes and many missions that people are on get no media until the day that someone perceives they did something wrong, or maybe they did do something wrong. Bam, go. Charity did X, Y, Z, boom. And it's like, well, hang on. If there's a true bad actor, call it out. Absolutely. But it's such a dark side of us. And so that's true. And that sucks. But what I love is that throughout all of human history, there are these pillars of hope and optimism against all odds. The sort of the story of Mandela and Gandhi, and you think of Mother Teresa and some of these figures who just sort of went the other way against all odds. And I love the big movements. I personally love the Mother Teresa story because I was like, oh, she just did actually quite small stuff. It just did it in her own little circle and sphere, and overall, over time, that ends up having this huge impact of none of which I don't think she set out to lead a movement, but it's just beautiful. But I love that we're drawn to that too. So yes, we're drawn to controversy. Yes, it's interesting, but it becomes so sludgy and thick and all-consuming and dark that I think when we see these other stories of optimism or, of hope, it brings something out in us, right? And I've often described Thankyou, and we talk about it in some of our internal language we use with partners. I do our Thankyou and even purpose as salt. Go with me on the analogy. It may not be perfect, but if you had one meal with salt, and one meal, same ingredients, same chef, without salt, one just tastes better. It just sort of brings out the flavor. Now, you could argue, well, what's the value of the salt? Hard to figure that out. But all we know is that it absolutely does something. It brings this sort of flavor out. And I think purpose and hope, it actually is like salt. It brings the best out in all of us. And we've seen that time and time again. This brings the best out in retailers, in manufacturers. It brings the best out in consumers. It brings the best out in people. And I love it. In fact, once I was challenged by a big VC fund, they're like, how on earth does Thankyou deliver the level of innovation you do when you don't have the budgets or the size of the teams that these other sort of competitors have? So, well, the answer, I think, is the salt purpose piece. Because when someone works with their craft, not just for themselves, but for the benefit of humanity, for a deeper purpose. So they could be a product developer that their whole life they've made, hand wash, or they've made a deodorant or whatever. Then they get this brief in this project, and all of a sudden it's like, hang on, you tell me I can bring what I've got to maybe do my life's best work that's going to improve the world. Like that's bringing a flavor out in me, and so I'm like, that's the secret. It's not money. It's not all the budgets and all the team. It's this idea of purpose. And so back to your question, like I may have lost myself a bit here, but I think the controversy is real. I think, but I think the hope we're attracted to it, and so I want us to be an example of it. I want, and I think the call to action is I mean, Mother Teresa's a great example. Start with what you can do in your circle, make a difference to the few people around you. That's enough. If it goes further, great. Yeah.
I think your final point there in highlighting using Mother Teresa is a really good example. It does talk to the point that you can only influence what you can influence, right? Yeah, we can't
Yeah.
change the world, but we can change the things and the people in our world, maybe, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and and I think that there is merit in that because I was actually having this conversation with my partner, and she, bless her, she loves going on a bit of a rant about how the world's working and operating and whatnot, and you know society are a bunch of sheep, and we as a
Mm.
society need to come together. I'm like, yeah, but darling, the society cannot just change as one. We need to have a series of small changes that accumulate to a grand shift to make it really work if we're to try and invoke any sort of change. Um, Talking about the controversy bit, could you almost argue that it's actually more controversial to be positive nowadays than it is negative?
Oh, yeah. Yes, absolutely. And I would say not try to get too political here, but I think the most controversial position sometimes in politics is the centrist. Those who are kind of in what was originally viewed as the kind of moderate middle, and now that's controversial because if you haven't picked a side, and if it's not far one way or the other, then you are what's wrong with the world. You are the personification of evil, and it's sort of this it's this dehumanizing that's going on, and so now it's controversial just to sort of be in the middle and be like, hey, maybe there's a little bit of good here and a little bit of good there, and so and I often feel like I find myself in this sort of centrist space in different places, and I suppose I say that to say this. Who would have thought that it's controversial to find yourself there? And I don't mean fence sitting, and that's such a nuance. But back to your point, I do think, yeah, it's controversial to be optimistic, to turn up to a big problem and say, what if we could change it?
Yeah.
And that's I think the business we're in at Thankyou. We can't do it alone. When you were speaking, it was just reminding me of almost the foundational thinking around movements. And
Mm.
the book, The Tipping Point, kind of sums this up from a business and movement perspective well. But there's a great YouTube video I saw once of one guy dancing in a field. Maybe you saw it too, but he's just dancing and it's awkward. And you're watching, you're like, oh, this sucks. This guy's going for it. He's giving it everything. And because of that, someone else gets up with him. Like
Mm.
he went so hard and then someone else got up. And by the end of this clip, it's like the whole field's dancing. And it wasn't an organized flash mob. It was a legit, like, this happened. And that is how movements start. Someone or a small group start dancing and everyone's like, that's so awkward and ridiculous. And then a few join. And then by the end of it, what's more ridiculous is if you're the person sitting down with your arms crossed while everyone's having the time of their life, you look like the odd one out.
100%. Now, before I let you go, I wanted to just touch on a topic that we did mention briefly before we jumped on the recording, which was around how young people are being paralyzed by the volume of information, being completely weighed down with the volume of information that is available to them. Our brains are not wired to be able to take on the amount of data that is being thrust upon us. You will have seen it yourself plenty of times, and obviously being a dad of young kids yourself, and your awareness of how the world operates and your ability to spot viral moments and be able to create virality and whatnot. And what's your take on how the youth can sort of start to slowly turn the engine over when it comes to doing things for themselves? How do we help these people to get away from the sheer scale of noise that's going on and be able to focus? Because that's something that you clearly did, back when you were 19. And it's something that you have clearly been one-eyed about, because hence why it's gone as well as it has gone. What are your thoughts around this, and what are the sort of things that we can perhaps try and promote as leaders of the next generations coming through to help them to find and keep hold of their purpose?
Look, I would start just with an acknowledgement that it is hard. And one could argue it's always been hard. And, yes, except we have never had literal trillion-dollar machines. These some of the biggest companies in the world who have got these algorithms absolutely aimed at this sort of one mission of maximizing attention for profit. And yes, they do some other things, and there's good, and we could spend a couple of hours talking about this, but I think what this means for young people is that your attention is being sold, stolen, extracted for value actually for someone else. Just as a side note, we are the product here, and so this makes it really, really tough. I get overwhelmed sometimes. Purely when you look at extreme poverty and some of the issues there, and with the different reports we read and the emails we get, and you get this charity or cause fatigue. People talk about it as a kind of a mass societal issue, but even personally, it's like, man, there's just so many injustices, and after a while, you're just like, what difference are we making? So there is a key to this. It's possible, and I would say step one. This is going to sound too simple, but there is a lot of noise. Step one is remove yourself from the noise. Now there's two ways you can do this. I mean, so I saw popping around a while ago on social media that was a popular phrase of monk mode, where it was just referencing like what some of the old, monks or different faith traditions, they would literally just go sit in a cave for years or on top of a mountain. So it was this like removing themselves and thinking and meditating, and so that's an extreme version of it. And I have a version of that in my life, which I call my blue sky day, where it's a day a week where switch the notifications off, emails, everything, and I get out, usually nature, climb a mountain, walk, and for me, take a notepad and pen, and it's a time to sit back from the noise, to think, to create, to write, to dream, to work on Thankyou, not just in it. For me, it's actually been a really spiritual, kind of grounding, amazing thing. But it is quite extreme because a day a week, that's a lot of time. Not everyone could do that. So I would say, okay, but also sometimes I can't do that. But I do have noise canceling headphones. Take that as a metaphor for you to say, even amongst the noise, how do you find silence? How do you get removed? Do a detox. I've deleted some social media apps. I haven't signed up to others. I've been off, Instagram on my personal account for coming on 3 years, and that was only a 3-week idea. I was going to do it for 3 weeks,
right?
But the further I got away from it, the more profound this whole thing got. Now I wrestle with like how to stay relevant, how to stay connected. Like this is a few other challenges that it implements, but I would say like it's impossible to think with the noise. So you got to cancel that noise. Then you get to think. And you may have a job or a purpose or a mission that includes having to get into the noise and into the conversation and change it and shape it. this is an old movie reference, and now I feel like I'm showing my age, which I can't believe I'm doing this. But The Matrix is a great metaphor for me. And if anyone hasn't seen it, in The Matrix, you've kind of got this character Neo, and he goes into the Matrix, kind of into the system. Actually, I said Neo. Did I even get that right? I've even lost my
Yeah, mate. No,
analogy
no,
here.
no. I'm with you.
Okay.
Come on.
So he goes into the matrix, so plugs in, right? Does the missions, does the work, and then gets out and unplugs. And if you haven't watched that movie, watch it and see it as a metaphor for plugging into the noise, because there's some work to be done in the noise, and we operate at Thank You in the noise, and helping try to change and shape the conversation, but then unplug from the noise. Um, I find it hard actually unplugging. I find it hard plugging back in.
Yeah.
But that's just me, and I'm sure you'll find it hard too. But start there.
Once you've unplugged, and you mentioned you go find yourself, put yourself in nature, and you take a notepad and pen. How do you begin your train of thoughts? Because I think for a lot of people, they hear about all these notions and ideas of meditation or getting away and unplugging and all that sort of stuff. But then when they get there, they're like, well, fuck do I do next?
Totally. And probably not even just that question. There is a literal, like an actual measured withdrawal that you're going through.
Yeah.
A withdrawal like this. So actually, like, I finally got to this space of quiet. It's actually going to be hell until you get through. And that's just a trigger warning. It's going to be real hard. Like, you come off sugar, you come off coffee, it's hard. You got to basically get through that period. Acknowledge it's going to be there. The withdrawals, the sort of, I need to be on my phone. I need to be scrolling. I need another hit. I need controversy. You got to pull away from that. You got to basically get through. Maybe you need a friend. Maybe you need a therapist, like someone who can actually help you navigate like this little period of time. Once you get through that reality, I think then you have clear space. And in that clear space, there's a few things I would say is like, you're not on your own, and you're not having to reinvent things. There are amazing books, which I feel like reading a book is a lost art form, because like, I can just, but there are, and I'd encourage someone to read the book versus listen to the 10-minute summary of the book, in like 2.5 times speed. Like, I mean, yeah, good for you. Like, yes, you can do it. Yes, you can absorb some information and jump to the next stuff. The process of like slow learning, it's like a lost art form, but it gives you time to consider, gives you time to have your own thoughts about the thoughts you're reading. And so that's like a book. Can't believe I'm saying it, but just it's like, that is great because you've got someone else who's thought long and hard about a topic that maybe you're interested in, you're exploring, and you get to navigate it with them, but then having your own thoughts along the way. A podcast may be an example of that too. But I think you don't have to do it on your own. I also have built in time in those days sometimes to catch up with someone. In person, ideal, on Zoom if I have to, or a phone call. But we talk about things, and I get to hear other people's perspectives. Like, I don't think we're meant to walk alone. And that's an important like nuance in the pursuit of silence and space, is not to end up in a lonely, dark place. That's not the goal here.
I like that. Silence can be shared, team. I think that's something for your notes, I reckon. Silence can most certainly be shared. And I think for a lot of people, because of how accustomed we are to not having silence, I think they fear it. They fear what they're going to find. And I know that I've gone through challenges of that sort of nature where, when you're forced to look at yourself, what you see is something that you've either been denying for a certain period of time, or you get shocked in and realizing something about yourself that you didn't realize was there because of how much distraction there is in the world, right? But it's the only way that you're going to be able to take control of yourself and your own emotions and your own thoughts and your own feelings and your own purpose, which is what we were talking about in the first place. Daniel, I'm very conscious of your time, and I would love to keep asking you plenty of questions. The way in which you articulate them, it makes me feel calm. So, if it makes me feel calm, I'm one of the not the easiest person to calm down. So if you're making me feel calm, I'm absolutely certain that whoever's listening to this, you're going to be feeling a benefit of just listening to this lad wax lyrical. So thank you so much for everything that we've gone through today. There was one final question though that I always ask, and because it doesn't matter how much of a high performer you are, we've all got chinks in the armor that we're working on constantly and what have you. Like you said, we're forever learning. Right now, I'm sure you've got some massive projects on the go, and let alone learning how to be a dad again because the routine's changed again. So tell me, if in your search towards your next version of high performance, what is the one thing that you personally feel that you need to work on the most?
My mind's split because I mean, practically there's some stuff I'm like, I need to get better at, from a content storytelling, actually cutting through the noise. I look at that now. I'm like, it's getting harder. You talk about these viral moments and being relevant. It's getting harder because you're competing with just some rubbish that ends up sort of taking the attention. So there is like a refining the craft of that, like, and as storytellers, which we are as a brand, like, and even for me individually, there's some work there. But I think based on the conversation we've just had, I'm probably challenged at a deeper level. That word silence that you said, there was a quote once I heard that said silence is deafening, and silence can be deafening. I think, true high performers are comfortable in silence. I used to go to float tanks. I don't know if everyone's done it before. It's like you float in this salt water and they shut the thing and it's all dark, and some people hate it because they just can't handle the silence. And I have struggled with that, but I actually found peace in silence. And it's not easy peace. It came from confronting the shadow.
Yeah.
And working that through with my wife, a great counselor, mentors, and actually, like, high performer, you can run out there and like win some awards. And I've stood on stages, been given some awards, and I'm like, what? How is this is crazy. But behind the scenes, it's like, actually, it's the comfort in silence and the shadow. And this now digs into like the bigger questions. What am I going to keep working on? Finding more space for silence, making sure that I've got, not just comfort in it, but I've got the foundations right. And it's probably in that space where I'll hear things like, I say I'm working on being a good dad, but am I giving enough time? And like, what's the plan I've got for Jed and River for the next couple of years? I could tell you the thank you plan. I could tell you the business plan. I could tell you how exciting it is. I could tell you what we've got coming. I could tell you what I think it's going to do and the optimism I have. But what's my plan for the kids? What's our plan for the kids? And so anyway, I'm going to continue to confront that space. I think that's what I can continue to work on.
Daniel Flynn, co-founder of Thankyou. I cannot thank you enough, my man. There's certainly things that I'm going to take on from here, and there's certainly plenty of things for your notes, gang. Those of you that are paying attention, I think there's something in being controversially positive. I think there is a joy to be found in that, and I think that what Daniel said is absolutely spot on. That when you see one of those positive videos, it invokes a reaction and a visceral emotion in you that I think can be just as addictive, and which can then become a real positive shift in the way that society works. But being peaceful in that silence is something that I think plenty of us fear or struggle to even remotely consider. But as Daniel mentioned just there, it's something that if you are a true high performer, you've got to be comfortable in that silence and in your own silence. I think that is real self-control at its highest form. Daniel Flynn, thank you so much for your time, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
Thanks, mate. Good to chat.
All right, then, team. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Make sure that you look after yourselves and each other. Stay safe, healthy, happy. And until next time, we'll catch you again. Speak to you soon. Take care.